Call of Duty 4 was this like phenomenal online success. And it has been ever since. Like third most successful game ever. The most successful game was genre ever. And context windows are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I just keep on trying more crap in there. When you want a good result out of LLM, you need to manage where its attention, locus of attention is, which is what's in that window. Cramming it full of 100 different MCP tools is bad context management. Everyone's started thinking about agents at the start of 2023. But we had agents 20 years before, or there was distributed systems, so just agents without AI. But like you'd have some little programs and they talk to each other in a distributed system, or even a peer-to-peer network, for example, where you self-organizing peer-to-peer network for file sharing and stuff. That was literally what I was studying back then. And this thing that's always motivated me, way back like kind of as an undergrad and a PhD student, and to some extent through Demonware, was this notion that in software you can design a program that connects to other programs. It can be a simple program, but it can create a complex network. And that network can have, to some extent, some emergent effects, and that's just fascinating, right? That you can somehow like the ant colony is more complex than the ant. Like that vision thing is still for have a uniquely human thing. And anyway, the overall lesson is you got to lean into it and keep on working with it, work through its deficiencies, which are still there, but will get better.
Yeah.
And learn how to do that, because that's a new skill now.
Hello, everyone. So we have a very exciting episode for you all today. So today we have Seán Blanchfield in the house here in Nova UCD.
Great to be here.
And thank you so much, Seán. So Seán is the founder of Jentic, which is an AI agentic platform, and we'll talk in a lot more detail about it. And he has founded several other companies as well in Ireland. So the founder of Demonware and also PageFair. So we've got a very interesting episode all about AI and where AI is headed. So welcome to the podcast, Seán. Yeah. So first question is always about yourself. And if you can take me back before you started any of your businesses, what was it that made you interested in starting them? Talk to me about your history a little bit there.
Sure. I think, so as a kid, I think I wanted to be self-employed. And so I started there. Yeah. Don't think there was any other fancy reason other than my dad was self-employed, in different kinds of ways over time. But the idea of having this boss wasn't something I really grew up with. I didn't see my parents having bosses, so I didn't want one either. When I went to college, it was 1996 and the web was happening. So I think that was the inevitability of it, looking back, is, the birth of the web, more or less. People were getting dial-up modems. I started in college and I realized that this is happening. I've got to learn this new thing called HTML. Press, make a website. And then I started selling websites, to make some money during the summer, going around industrial estates, business parks with these printed out, ancient flyers. I'll make you a website and call in door to door, trying to sell online website services. And stuck.
So it's hustling at an early age, basically.
Yeah. It didn't come naturally to me. I drove myself to do it, but I'm not a born marketeer or salesperson. I was actually really shy back then, but I really wanted to do it. So before even the very first real company was Forest, but before that, I bought a mobile phone, very, very fancy, in 1998 to have a mobile phone, so that I could pretend to be a real business and people could call me. I was putting flyers into all these business parks, selling their sets and trying to get going like that. So that was the very start. I think we'll come back to it maybe later, but I've had a few conversations recently where the parallel between the birth of the web and the birth of AI has kind of come up. And what are students supposed to do today? And it hasn't been about technology at this scale. It's happened since. But back then, students were figuring out the web. And people like my age now, I'm 47, and the 47-year-olds, and even the people in business in the late 40s back then were skeptical of the web. Now, I think there's probably a whole bunch of parallels right now today in students figuring out how to use AI in ways that, you know, I'm trying to imagine, but I might not be the best placed person to imagine.
So how did you then get started? So perhaps to look at what were some of the learnings that you had from when you were in college that, maybe still apply or don't apply now.
Um, I think probably the core thing I have that makes me do this is I've learned not to be embarrassed about failing. I'm okay with embarrassment. Largely, I think, because I just like flamed out massively embarrassing situations a few times in college. And after that, I just felt bulletproof. Like I could never be more embarrassed than I was this time or that time. And that allowed me to,
Mm.
yeah,
Any
do.
stories there that you can share? That's and you, like it's always nice to it's always nice to hear.
Oh, these are low stakes kinds of things, but like when I ran for student union, again, just trying to drive myself into an uncomfortable situation, find a deep end to jump into. So as a shy engineering student, I ran for full-time student union office. Um, that worked in terms of getting me out of my shell. I won somehow, and that was a very good year for my own development. But during the election process, I still, like in terms of these embarrassing moments, I'm probably the only person in the world who would remember it or care. But yeah, I had yet to give speeches. I was giving speech to like 300 people, 400 people. And it's like in the base, right? And your opponents are there and their supporters are there hurling questions and abuse and the stage questions, and you have to duck and dodge. And I just made a joke, a very bad joke. That was just embarrassing, like a pun. And it was so bad that I just saw everyone in the audience just crumple and just look at me in disgust.
Oh,
Or that's what they perceived. And I remember just like, oh, like, and just that feeling 25 years ago, it's still there, fresh. But that probably, I mean, for all I know, that was a formative little experience because I made a really bad pun in front of a very large crowd and just felt like freaking inadequate at her. But it couldn't get worse in terms of just that personal shame of a whole bunch of,
that couldn't get worse.
yeah. Because like, who cares? Like, next time I stood in front of a crowd, I wasn't really sweating it. This time it's not going to be, what's the worst that I could do, you know? Make 100 people nearly hurt and vomit with disgust at how bad the pun was. I mean, probably won't happen again. So let's just see what happens. And after that, really, I wasn't afraid standing in front of a crowd, for example.
Yeah. So it's important to put yourself in these uncomfortable situations and then to really see how shit it can feel at first.
It's all fine in the end, right? So, no one now told everyone, but no one remembers that. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you were doing this, you were doing college, you got into the student union, and then you also were selling websites kind of in the summers. Um, so how did you go from there, I guess, onwards?
well, it was the student union with student union really, and was it like, yeah, everyone who's been in college probably has the same kind of picture. Most people kind of go 9 to 5, and then a few, maybe 5 or 10%, depending on the place you're in, needs to do something else. And those are interesting people, and I found those people in the student union most. Either in the student union or around that kind of student life, you know. So in my case, the Student Publications Committee in Trinity College Dublin was in the same building. You know, they ran the newspaper and various magazines and stuff. The treasurer of that was Dylan Collins, and one of the journalists in the student newspaper was Ronan Percival. As
What's that?
Ronan Percival.
Okay.
And we met each other that year while I was in the student union. The year after that, I joined up as a kind of part-time amazing, basic IT guy for the publications by student to me, and we worked more closely together. And from that, it was basically like, you know, working together on paper and magazines, or me fixing the computers and the Macs, or ISDN line back then, that kind of stuff. We realized we all had this common interest in starting businesses. They had already been doing the same kind of thing. So on the next one we teamed up, and that became Forest. And yeah, that's its own story. So, yeah.
And so how important do you think it is to sort of work or meet with like-minded people to help to get you started? Because I mean, now it probably seems inevitable that you were going to start businesses or at least one business. But how kind of formative were those relationships to your future?
For me, they were important because they raised my ambition level.
Okay.
And I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what that looked like back then.
Yeah.
Also, it's a long time ago. Unfortunately, it's a long time ago, but this is like 25 years ago. Startups weren't celebrated in the way they are today. There weren't movies about this kind of stuff. No, we read all these books. Word accelerated programs didn't exist. So the idea of starting a pure tech company that this is something you could do, like yourself, wasn't really, obvious.
Yeah.
So hanging out with other people was, or like doing this as a product company more specifically and trying to sell over the internet. That was new, right? E-commerce wasn't even fully right. So yeah, very important. I probably would have ended up doing a consultancy business or something else other than meeting these other smart people at that end of, like in that building in Treadby College. And then also just their ambition level was greater than mine. Yeah, I wanted to not have a boss. They wanted to conquer the world. And I realized, and not just Ronan and Dylan, but everyone else there, everyone who went to, not speaking to Ronan and Dylan here, but mostly like all the beta societies and all the posh people who go to Trinity College Dublin, which is like this was the most prestigious university in Ireland, went to much better schools than me. I was one of the only people in my school that got into third level education, right? And both of the people went to schools where it was expected that everyone would and would go there. And they expected that they would run the country someday. And so getting to meet these people was important for me because it gave me an opportunity to realize that they weren't any smarter than me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what were your parents so I'm presuming your parents were supportive during this time, or what was their kind of take on that?
Yeah, they kind of just were confused, but it's just, he seems to know what he's doing.
They were confused.
Yeah, so like, well, they're happy I went to college. I was the first by habits go to college.
Yeah.
I had to go to university. So that was good. And I did fine academically. An example of this, of their position with it, was a little bit later. Forrest had begun to pick up, right? We were doing group text messaging, right? In 2001, way before WhatsApp, right? That's where it started. And we built a web app, like a SaaS product where you go and add in numbers and send group text messages over SMS back then. And that began to pick up. I was doing a PhD as well. So I finished my undergrad and moved into a PhD in distributed systems. And I was like part-time in the company, full-time on the PhD. And we began to raise money for Demonware at the same time. You had this other idea, which we'll maybe come back to. That's video games, the video game story. I didn't think we were really going to be able to raise money for that and to be working to be able to do it without money, without capital. But we did raise, and then I had to leave the PhD. And when I was telling them that, they were, what do you do? You're going to leave your education, which is, I had a grant and then had everything to do what I was doing. And you're going to leave that to do your own what now? And I was trying to stay multiplayer band by hers. 2002. So, yeah, but in the end, they were just, okay, that's, they just acknowledged, I think, that there is a world that they're not going to be the best place to judge. So that was great. Great, isn't
That's great. Yeah. So let's go into Demonware.
Yeah.
So you raised money for Demonware.
Yeah, it took a year, 2002, Ireland, like different world really, right? You raised $500,000 from Enterprise Ireland.
Which would have been a lot back then.
Yeah. A lot of money. So from Enterprise Ireland, from one seed fund, and from 3 or 4 angels, and kind of scraped it together. It took a year, and we met everyone in Ireland, basically, who we could figure out had any money. There wasn't we're meeting seed funds to meet, so we're like meeting lots of rich people trying to get them to us money. Anyway, got there in the end. The idea was multiplayer video games were going to take off one of these days. We, like, back then at colleges and computer labs, it's all people did. Once 5 p.m, came along, new on Songs of Fortune and Quake, right? And we played it too, and we saw it, how much fun it was to play against people instead of just NPCs head on. So we thought that's probably going to go mainstream. And mainstream back then meant Xbox One, the original Xbox, not Xbox One, but the original one, and PlayStation 2. They didn't even really have networking yet, but we thought this is going to happen. So let's get ready for it. Let's be the company that builds the underlying technology that will allow the game studios to build multiplayer into their games. On the assumption, the basis, we thought that video game studios mostly contain people who want to do graphics. That's why they're there. They don't get switched on by, programming netcode and socket level stuff from thinking about internet packets. And it turned out we were absolutely right. So that's how you succeed in business.
Be right. Have a hunch and be absolutely right. Have a hunch, follow it, and be right.
Yes, so we're 22 and we just called that. We got it wrong in a few ways at the start. Like, we tried to do massively multiplayer games at the start. That was wrong. We tried to do the really hard things, create a very difficult product with complex products, because we felt that would give us a right to exist. If you got given lots of money, presumably you should do something really complicated with it, right? We had this complicated product for massively multiplayer games, and that didn't work. There were only like 3 of those games, and none of them wanted someone else's networking software. But we, created, 3 different versions. I suppose 3 major product pivots, not market pivots, but product pivots. Still netcode for games, and then eventually, we ended up in a game like Soldier Go. Starship Troopers was the first one, and then there was a Poby game, and then Conjun, and then I out 70 more games.
So, that concept of you thought you had to do something super, super complicated, I feel like that is a thing with maybe academic people, or, people who are very much who are very intellectual. So what would you say to somebody who is perhaps, more kind of intellectual academic, who thinks, oh, like they need to make this thing be super complicated, maybe technically, before it's kind of a worthwhile or valued business?
Yeah. Well, they're wrong about that. Basically, we all learn it at some point. It's what's that?
So what's the most important thing that? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. There's this like overused quote, but I don't know. Someone said Mark Twain, or maybe someone said someone else. I read it, might be Voltaire, but sorry for the length of my letter. I didn't have time to write a short one.
Oh yeah.
No,
To simplify things.
it's kind of really hard, actually. To find the succinctly just the right thing.
Yeah.
That's actually a great challenge.
Yeah.
It's basically, that's the challenge of getting it right. You can make something complicated for an imaginary problem easily enough. You just have to spend time. So maybe that's the problem with academia. Like, where that academic approach is that it's quite isolated. It's not about doing it for a market. There isn't something to get right.
Yeah.
There's only burrowing deeper and deeper down your rabbit hole.
Yeah.
As an
For intellectual curiosity rather than for what the market actually wants or needs.
easy. Yeah. The best case for intellectual curiosity. Maybe just for sheer activity, or maybe because there's grants available or other point scoring exercises. Right? And a lot in academia is kind of, disappointing these days.
Okay, cool. Okay, fair. So Call of Duty, how did that, talk to me about how that kind of started? Because I think that's the main, that's one of that's one of the big things that you're quite well known in Ireland for.
So those tangentially associated with that video game for a while.
Yes, at least when I first heard about you, because I was in Trinity at the time as well. I think you gave, if I remember correctly, I think you gave a talk in Trinity at the time that I attended.
Okay.
And that was the main kind of focus point.
That's great. So let's do those talks. Set up like future hires maybe, or work with in the future in some capacity. It's good when it's remembered. So that was, we were a startup group. We made no money for the first 12 or 18 months. We were trying to build this product. We finally got it done, and it was wrong. We had to pivot a few times, but we were going rapidly. At least we were pivoting very rapidly. This is Dylan and me, by the way. Just about the people names sung in the story. Ronan Saber Forest. Ronan is basically, I think the best I know, started one company, which is Forest, which he still runs, which is a huge success now. Right, he's ran with that company. It's not group messaging anymore. It's a salon management business, like a platform for salon management. Well, it's one of the most successful in the world. And he's done fantastic podcasts, and he's like going to be like kind of a uni entrepreneur. One company, go along, make it being successful.
Yeah.
Which is
a great path. Yeah.
Yeah. And Dylan and me jumped out of Forest and did Demonware. So Dylan was the person bringing the market and like hitting. I was the CTO, so he was hitting me in the head saying, "Give me my product. We have to do this for customers, right?" So at least we were iterating rapidly.
Yeah.
And we managed to sell it like for about 50,000 a pop. That was the way we were pricing it. Like this is like 2003, 2004. I think technically we had the software on an FTP server, and if you had the right code, you could download it. But a lot of people wanted us to FedEx them the DVD with the code in it. So it kind of space, right? So we're selling a DVD for $50,000.
Wow.
With code in it, with a license to the code.
And that's so much money for, for some like a new business completely to just kind of like go out there and just say, you have to pay me 50,000 euro at the time, right?
Oh, dollars sort of said that.
Oh, dollars. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seemed like a lot of money to us, but then again, we were running a company,
but you went first, like you went for it to ask for that, and
yeah, that's kind of amount that video game studios would pay for things like this. Like for a graphics engine, maybe it's a bit more. For the physics engine, probably 50 grand. Yeah. For the thing of the video player for like cutscenes, that might be like 15,000-20,000 a pop, like per game, right? So it was in that percentage. So we were beginning to click, but what we were getting back from the market is you've solved the in-game networking piece, as in we can create this shooter game or racer game or whatever, and it appears to be real time to the people playing it, even if they're across the internet. Well done for writing good networking code. But we need the hosted services to go with this.
So it is kind of how you actually get it out, not just not quite the quote unquote integrations, but it's about your actual deployment mechanism, not just the thing itself.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. But I can say it in like probably even simpler terms. Like we built the plumbing to make the one player be able to shoot another player in a shooting game, but they still had to be a server somewhere where they could find each other and see the scoreboards and say what matches are on, or I want to join that match, or I want to add this person as a friend, which is basically called social features today. But it was also before social networks. So unless you can't Friendster or something. So they needed that because you couldn't actually get into a game unless there was a directory of games that were on, for example. So we started doing that, and that ended up being the breakout product. That turned into really big infrastructure. But it's like pre AWS, pre-cloud. So we were buying servers and racking them in data centers. So it was a bit more bare metal back then. But we had the thousands of servers in 5 data centers around the world to service this stuff. But it was high volume. Players playing games were all connected to us. The game traffic would go peer to peer, but everything else, like their scores and everything, would go through us. Anyway, Call of Duty comes into the picture, and then Call of Duty, so the new consoles back then were Xbox 2, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. And this is around 2006. They were the next-gen consoles of the day, and Activision was working on Call of Duty 2, having bought Infinity Ward. Call of Duty 1 was a breakout indie success, wonderful game. Activision bought them for tons of money and were making the next version, which was the launch game for both consoles. It was a big deal. And that was totally fine, but they were making a kind of crappy version of the same game. Like, actually, it was a totally different game, but it was branded as Call of Duty 2, Big Red one, like an alternate version of it. That was for the older consoles, so that no matter what console you had, you could buy something. And then on the other game, they didn't have any networking thing. They just had no one to work on it. So they called us and said, "Hey, you Irish bears do networking, you fly out here. Okay, you're a company, just relocate here and spend a year with us, get this game out."
So why did they call you guys? Like, how did they find you? Or what was it about you that they were like, yeah, these people were...
I guess we were going to conferences.
Mm.
Yeah. There were only 3 companies in the world doing what we did. The old one, which was GameSpy, which wasn't very good. Everyone was familiar with them, but they were just had so much technical debt, it was just basically unusable. And it wasn't really a technology company anymore. So they couldn't face. They probably just say shit. And we had a...
Don't mince your words, please.
They had their success, you know. But tech up from a technology point of view, then that was the situation. And we had a competitor in Montreal who were good, but they were the same vintage as us, you know, a startup basically. And I would say their solution was too academic.
Yeah.
And it was actually very similar to a version we had at the start that we threw it because we thought that's just too abstract and...
So maybe it was too complicated.
Yeah, too complicated to use, I think. You have to learn. We go down a rabbit hole. You have to learn something kind of like Corba.
Okay.
Uses.
So was it easy to use? Was it sort of accessible to everyone or the company that wanted to use it?
Yeah, if you built from the perspective of the video game developer, you'd end up closer to what we got on version 3. After we threw out version 1, which is kind of what theirs was, which is building from the perspective of a PhD student. So, yeah, they found us easily enough. There weren't that many people to call. And we had a few games out, so I suppose they could look at that and say, well, we saw Starship Troopers. You know, it wasn't a AAA game, but, you know, these guys did it. Award.
Cool.
Cool. So, yeah, but there was a challenge there. They said they wanted us basically on a services basis for a whole year, which would involve shutting down the company and becoming a services business.
What do you mean by services business in this case?
They wanted our team, such as it was, to get in the plane and live in Santa Monica for a year. In Treyarch, the studio of building it again.
So see, in hindsight, because Call of Duty just became so big.
Yeah.
In hindsight, that sounds like a good idea.
In hindsight, but at the time, it was an existential thing, where it was, what kind of company are we? We had this idea we wanted to be this thing, which was a software product company, not a semi-novel idea. And we had one of the biggest potential customers in the world saying they wanted basically to rent us, not our software, but us. And yeah, we had a very vigorous debates, me and Dylan, about that one, because we didn't have a lot of other. Yeah, business wasn't going great. It was going okay, but it wasn't going great. So it was hard to say no to. Anyway, after a lot of banks and hand-wringing and stuff, we negotiated a middle ground with them where we said, we're going to sell you our products, but we're going to give you this wonderful professional services package alongside it. And we're going to keep people on site all the time. We've always had at least 1, maybe 2 engineers. We have time zone coverage, like across, you know, Dublin and West Coast America. So that's basically 16 hours of the day has
Sick course kind of thing.
Yeah, or like when they finished their day, the on-site engineer would flip their work back to Dublin. You know, and the elves are working all through the night to fix it. And when they go back into work in the morning, you know, there's progress now still. And it actually did work like that. And
what's the name for that? Is that support now, or what would you call it more? Literally just development now?
I think I would say that was professional services.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. We call it a support engineer.
Okay.
But yeah. In that case, it was basically, they were like, yeah, cool, you have the software, but our needs will be special. So we need people on site when working on site. And we like instant response. If there's a problem, we need a person who will fix it right there.
And any business thinks that their needs are special.
Yeah, the bigger ones. Anyway, so that was Brian, but we got it out. The game launched. Let's say the networking was nearly flawless, though.
Amazing.
There might be people on Activision who remember it differently. But surprisingly, the latency-free kind of work. I worked well enough that it was automatic that we would do the networking on Call of Duty 3. And then that was successful too. Automatically we did Call of Duty 4. Call of Duty 4 was the one that made Call of Duty the recognized franchise it is today. Before that was just a good game. Call of Duty 4 was this like phenomenal online success. And it has been ever since. Like third most successful game ever. The most successful game of this genre ever. Was like making $1 billion a year or more, like since then, basically. And yeah, so Call of Duty 4 was just crazy. It used to be like to be, maybe 80,000 players would connect for the first week of a game, and then it'd lose interest, and there'd be maybe 1,000 players connected playing, and having difficulty finding games to get into because there's so few of them. And Call of Duty just got to that within an hour or so. Within a day, there was maybe 500,000, and then we got to, I think, up to 2 million, 3 million people playing this game simultaneously and just stayed there. And they kept on launching more and more games. So, yeah. So Demonware is still there, and Activision acquired us, and I was a VP there for a while. And there's 100 people here in Dublin, 100 roughly in Vancouver. I think there's another 50 or 100 dotted around the world, some in Shanghai, and maybe some in Ontario or Quebec or something. And they still run Call of Duty basically.
Amazing. I love it. I love that. Wow. Okay, so then Page Fair was a big thing that you worked on. Maybe talk to me just briefly about that one, because I'm
Yeah. Let's skip that. So that's the misspent years in ad tech. The more interesting part was the journey to it, because posting were at a half a year of PTSD burnout, recovery as entrepreneurs do it. Then started going again, trying to find a company with a new co-founder, Brian McDonald, and we went to maybe 3 different attempts. Started a company, find something that would really click. On attempt number 3 took like 11 months to get through before we called it a day.
What?
And then we thought, what the hell are we doing? This is going to take a long time going like this. So we decided to go in parallel rather than series. So we started a lab, and we took all of our business ideas, and we had about 50 that we written down over time. And we hired a few people, had our own funds, and set it up with the lean startup process, more or less, which was new at the time, and ran in parallel to try to find good businesses very, very efficiently and by the numbers, for better or for worse. Right? And we launched from 50 plans down to researching about half of them in detail, launching 5 MVPs.
Wow.
Of those, a few began to get traction. Of those, one of them had intense traction, and that became Page Fair. And that was basically trying to solve ad blocking from the point of view of web publishers, because ad blocking was spiking among gamers, which we knew something about. And we thought that was going to be a leading indicator for everything else, anything else. Because ads are getting shit, really sending in a vicious cycle of quantity. And people were responding by installing ad block in their desktop browsers and basically opting out of ads, cold send. So there's some kind of business there, because there's so much money being lost by people installing ad block, like billions, just back on a low people tell. And the growth was insane. So that was that. That was 6 years. That was a very venture backed. It went very well in the middle. At the end, it kind of got fenced out of the market by some of the monopolies that are at it there. And some other elements, but I think that was the primary cause of it stalling, and we sold that to a competitor.
Can I ask you one question about that? Because I do want to come on to Jentic. So this kind of idea that, especially like you said, around your journey of getting started with Page Fair. So I went to a talk that actually Oisin Hanrahan gave in New York, so he's an Irish entrepreneur, and he also talked about kind of doing this lab sort of scenario of, after his first business, doing this lab scenario of trying to find the best idea, and And this is something that I found can be interesting, something that I've been thinking about recently, more so in the sense of uh, when somebody is starting a business, how important do you think it is for them to have a vision or something that they're very passionate to work on, rather than this kind of lab idea, which in my mind seems to be completely different, where your end goal is to try to find kind of something that works, something that the market will want. And it doesn't really matter if you're, actually quote unquote passionate about it or you have vision about it. And these two seem like different things in my mind.
Just is. And I think the lab model has two main failings. One is people who's actually going to run the things you spin out. Hard to find entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs don't really know how to run someone else's thing, right? And this has been remarked on in other labs. Rocket Internet was quite successful and spun out a lot of major companies in Europe. But I think there's plenty of stuff out there about that difficulty of finding leaders for the spin-outs. So that's one thing. In our case, we shut down the company, we shut down the lab and jumped into the spin-out because we couldn't think of anything else to do. Just give it everything we have, and we had ourselves. The other thing, though, is what you're talking about, which is trying to take this highly scientific, by the numbers approach to business discovery, lead to, like in computer science terms, hill walking to the local maximum. Right? So, you're in this landscape, you're like trying to optimize a number. You optimize a number until you get to a local peak.
Okay.
You're here, and then every other thing you try to do makes the number drop. You could be on a peak here, over here there's a mountain, right? How do you get to that mountain? Well, if you go about numbers, you can't even see the mountain, right? That's a matter of conviction. So really letting the numbers and measurability dictate everything precludes a lot of things.
Yep.
One little example from our experience was that one of the 5 things we launched was an instant messaging HTML instant messaging client that you could drop onto a website with one line.
Which also sounds like a good idea in hindsight.
Yeah. So it's like 2012. It got hard. The back end tech was kind of hard. The web sockets weren't quite edgy.
It sounds a lot more complicated underneath the hood rather than the surface thing sounds great, but yeah.
So we had the back end engineering, the capability to be able to make something that actually would scale back then, and other people were going at the same stuff, right? But we were like, here you go. It's like little Google chat widget drop into a homepage. Maybe your community on the website will chat to each other. In sense from a games perspective, sure we came all to it from. But like a mini HTML Slack, you would just drop into a website, for example, or onto a form. At the same time, some other guys down the street were doing the same kind of tech, and that became Intercom. Because
that's literally what I was going to say. That sounds like Intercom.
Yeah, and it's an actual destination, and we didn't, because we were, I suppose, had this thing, and we were trying to throw out small little MVP experiments, but it wasn't coming from a vision basis.
And also, I suppose that's the other kind of problem with it, is that you can it takes time for all of these things. So if you're kind of doing it in that trying things like that, you the first thing mightn't work, but like Intercom, if you take it far enough, perhaps it can.
Also, Intercom could have also not made it. It's all for things that didn't come quite still be Robin, right? And we, the survival bias and all this kind of shit.
Yeah, of course.
But in their case, they certainly made it.
Yeah. That was a problem with the lab approach.
Yeah, if you take it too seriously. But still, I think on mature reflection, perhaps, I think that what I take away from it is that there's some really strong things as well. Always having a backlog of other things you could be doing instead of the current thing is good. Some people might debate that, but I think basically that's actually wasting your time. It holds you to account, makes you hold yourself to account that you're investing all this time trying to go deep on this one thing. But if you basically lose faith in it and you're like, I thought that vision was really interesting a year ago, but it's not anymore. These other things have changed. Gives you basically impetus to walk away because you always got this other thing you can work on instead.
So if you lose interest in the bigger vision, Because it could be that you still have a bigger vision, but you need to pivot within that.
It could be, yeah. But it just ends up more squishy, I suppose. I would take a more
Okay.
squishy kind of approach where and there's a list of ideas
Yeah.
and a backlog of other things to be working on, and reasonably compelling business plans, or plausible business plans maybe is the most we could hope for. And there's the one you're currently doing, and just always having that there on the wall, say these are all the things I'm not working on, so we can work on this thing, right? And you just let your intuition kind of decide whether you're going to stay on this one,
Yep.
or leap over to the other one. I think that's at the because one of the most common things you see with young entrepreneurs and sometimes old entrepreneurs, and maybe like we're in an accelerator building here or incubator, there's many around, and then there's various meetups that I go to, and the one that I run, and you see people who really just want to shake and say, stop doing that company, and just because how come's not working out. Sometimes people just, it's their baby and have one baby and they won't let go. And it's like, just have you can have another, give me a thing after this thing. You should use more.
There is life. It's about having that perspective, right? That there is other life there, out there. Right? So
I'm not sure if we'll ever get to AI here. Who's this celebration that goes on in just startup industry, like the whole cult of startups that goes on, celebrating this hero's journey. It was like the plucky Frodo style character who somehow made it to Mount Doom against all odds and built a unicorn. We fetishize this kind of person who kept at it for 12 years despite everything in the world being against them, right? This is a really good story. But, for any one of those people, it has to be 1,000 people who bankrupt themselves and their family and wasted their lives. And they tried just as hard. They just didn't get lucky. So if you have to start and you get to decide what strategy you want to play, you want to take those odds, then most likely you'll waste your life and bankrupt your family. Or are you going to,
be willing to pivot,
be willing personally pivot when you need to. And anyway, the world, everything takes time.
Yeah.
The world changes
Yeah.
around you. You have to be aware, but you have to be able to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Jentic, so if I move to where you are now, with Jentic, my impression of all of this, and you might correct me, is that you did have that vision from it. It seemed like you were kind of exploring for a little bit, but once you kind of latched onto the vision, that was kind of it. And sure, you probably had a few sort of changes and everything there. So talk to me about where Jentic is at. Maybe how you got started, a little bit about how you got started, but more so where it's at now. What is that vision?
Yeah. Okay, so it started with looking at the connections between things form a network. Always do, right? That is complex. That's always the case. I came from a distributed systems background at the start of my story. So I started looking at AI seriously again, late 2022, like everyone else, and had emerged post-pandemic and was looking to get into trouble again in a new business. So when I was looking at it in more and more depth and beginning to think about agents, I think agents started getting everyone started thinking about agents at the start of 2023. But we had agents 20 years before, or there was distributed systems, so just agents without AI. But you'd have some little programs and they talk to each other in a distributed system, or even a peer-to-peer network, for example, where a self-organizing peer-to-peer network for file sharing and stuff. That was literally what I was studying back then. And this thing that's always motivated me, way back kind of as an undergrad and a PhD student, and to some extent through Demonware, was this notion that in software you can design a program that connects to other programs. It can be a simple program, but it can create a complex network, and that network can have, to some extent, some emergent effects, and that's just fascinating, right? That you can somehow the ant colony is more complex than the ant, right?
Fair.
The ant colony is an evolved entity in its own right.
Yeah, the organization of it in a way.
Yeah. And we can do the same thing with computers. Anyway, this is always maybe always switch wheel. I'm just thinking about trying to take risks this way. Can you design that complexity and design in that emergence?
Yeah.
And just interesting.
Yeah.
So AI then was like agents, eh? So what's going to be hard about this? Obviously, LLMs are hard, right? That's the fundamental breakthrough here. But I can't do that. That's not what I spent the previous 20 years getting good at. There was a lot of other pieces of feeder technology, like vector databases seemed really hard at the start until we realized we could provide code vector databases, and that was 50 vector databases and they're free, right? So that all happened like in 6 months while I was thinking. Like start to end. Yeah, but when you start imagining agents getting deployed, so agents just being, you could say chatbots that do stuff, but more specifically chatbots that do stuff in the background.
Yeah.
Right. So they have their own lives. They live in the digital infrastructure, chugging away, doing work that comes in from somewhere. They're working normally against APIs. In my view, there's another kind of agent that works against human user interfaces, like a ChatGPT agent that recently launched. And that's fine. That has a place. But I think like at scale, we're going to see agents mostly working against machine interfaces, not human interfaces, which means APIs, which means they're in the infrastructure. And I'm thinking about this, I was like, okay, those agents in themselves are a bit complicated, but not too complicated. And actually, I could say this for sure, and because we're launching an agent framework and it's 1,000 lines long, all right? It's the agents themselves are hard, but the connections between everything. You're back into basically every network has its own kind of complexity and needs to be managed. So that was the fertile ground I wanted to build the company. That's distributed systems as applied to AI agents.
Mm-hmm.
I was back on my turf again. Well, it's like a very relevant, fascinating, and important thing to try to get it right. And so that was the start, I think, which was intuiting that, oh, there's this deep area over here. Most AI people won't realize how hard this bit is going to be. They're just coming at it from an ML background or an infrastructure background. They don't know just what a tar bit it's going to be when you try to solve authorization.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. And we're seeing now already, there's so many frameworks that are coming out, but actually to get them to work quite well, like an issue that even with, for example, LangChain, and then that sort of morphed into LangGraph, and that has a lot of complexity in there. Like, for example, trying to manage state memory, it's very much an evolving area that I don't think there's a right solution. And even where there's so much hype, it's like MCP, for example. There's so much hype about that, but actually, when we're recording right now, this change in the next few months, it's quite complex to get it to work as well as you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big problem.
And it's a big problem. Integrations, right?
Yes.
Is the big stuff, which is
Exactly. Yeah.
connecting an AI to some external system.
Yeah.
MCP, it's had this big moment.
It's still having its moment.
Yeah, there's so process happening, but
You'll have to explain that now.
yeah, it's MCP is well known, but basically, let's put it this way: you can put MCP into something like Claude or Cursor or some other pre-built agents. So let's say it's a coding agent, makes the example easy. And great, now it can, let's say for remote MCPs anyway, it can connect to some API and do a query, do a search, for example. But mostly the remote API is just a REST API that's been wrapped with an MCP server on the other end.
Yeah.
Right? So the remote API already was there, but it was already described in an open API file, which contained documentation for it.
Yeah.
Right. There was another path, which is you can just get a coding agent to use curl, which is a command line HTTP client.
For calling REST API.
Call REST API. And there's plenty of reasons to believe that it was and still is better. What did MCP actually add that?
Yes.
Right. It's ergonomic. You say it's ergonomic in some ways for the LLM because if you have complex APIs on the server, it can kind of sit in front of them and simplify them and so on.
Yes. I think that was the original vision. I would try to that a new kind of protocol to simplify all these calls.
Yeah, but that's not the
replace.
Yeah. Yeah, it's supposed to be a protocol.
Yeah.
Right? So just in the design of these things, the protocols in the schema is supposed to describe the resource, right? some structured documentation maybe, and then there's how you connect to it. It's so hard to connect to it over MCP, you connect to it over HTTP. Depending on the context, maybe you could connect to it over other like networking protocols, like binary networking protocols, or if you're on the same host, you can connect locally or something. The protocol is fine. It's how do you connect to it then. The nature of the thing itself is something else, right? So MCP ends up kind of being a protocol, but it's trying to change the nature of the thing it's a protocol connected to.
Yeah.
There's just an easier way, which is if the API is sucked in the first instance, fix the API. Right. If it's an API that has, you need to do 7 kind of steps to try to use it, or count 7 sub bits and put it together in a certain way, then there might be good reasons for that. AI operating directly against that is going to be, this compounding error rate, 5% chance of screwing up new steps, 7 steps, it's going to be a big error rate at the end.
Especially if you multiply it up by multiple AI agents.
If you're trying to string agents, this is people trying to make things as complicated as possible, right? I mean, 5, I don't know why you work 2 agents in a row either. How much non-determinism do you need to add? But the better path is to fix if that API is hard to use, make the simple to use version of it. You can create an extra endpoint for that common use case, like a higher level API equivalent to lower level APIs. This is often done. It's just called having a good API, that you can use the granular primitive things at the bottom. You can use like the higher level abstraction, use the even higher level abstraction. Like in Stripe, you can play around with the payments or charges API at the bottom, or you can deal with subscription objects at the top, right? AI might be unreliable trying to make a subscription work if it's working at the bottom layer, but reliable at the top because it's easier. And so like, even if you bring MCP into it, it doesn't change that. Most MCPs that are out there, and according to one website, there's over 16,000 now, are just wrapping APIs that were crafted to begin with, and the MCPs are crafted as a result. And the only way to make the MCPs good is to fix the underlying APIs, like basically to create a higher level abstraction on top of the expose stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we create that higher level tool, or that's just called an API. That's what it is. And you know what? Once you've done that and you look at the whole system, you're like, I can just call that a curl. I don't need MCP.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, then you start criticizing MCP, like it takes like very context documentation, like say an open API file has very granular documentation about APIs. So animated I am now talking about APIs. And not many people often get this excited about APIs. It's like OpenAPI is like a 15-year-old spec with all this detail in it that thousands of companies have crafted. All that information's in there. And this is what makes it accurate. It's all the nuance about what to come, for how to come this, what kind of way to form on the parameter, what it means when it returns a certain kind of 400 series error code or whatever. And you take all of that and you summarize it into like 2 sentences and give it to AI and say, AI, don't screw up. And you just like stripped all the detail. Right? Also, very little for lockdown no authentication. And now it has some OAuth, but that's just not enough. So maybe it starts adding more authentication kind of methods. Nothing about authorization, which is what you're at access. Just not present in the protocol, right? Nothing about rate limits or policies and other stuff. Like if you start adding in the stuff that people will require in order to make it useful for like production scale deployments with like that's safe.
Yeah.
It's going to be as big as the thing it's trying to replace, which is OpenAPI, and we'll look at it in full circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just like a little bit, I think it's a good protocol. What it is very good for is Cursor supports it, Cloud supports it, Amazon Bedrock supports it, various agent builders support it. It's really nice to have a common plugin format. And that's what even in Windsurf, it's like they relabeled FCP as plugins. I think that's what it is.
A way that I've summarized it before, because I actually remember having the same conversation with my brother, actually, who's also a software engineer, is it is simpler for the AI to access all of these, in a way, the APIs or the data behind the APIs with MCP. So it's kind of a simplification. So it's like whatever you could do That's its goal, perhaps. Whatever you could do with APIs before, now you have MCP, and its stated goal is that it just makes that easier.
Mm.
In theory.
In a little bit easier, but by the time you make it good, you're back to solving the underlying problem.
And that's why right now Noteby is not, well, from what I've heard, not too many people are using it for production systems. Everyone's using it for sort of prototypes or kind of playing around with it. But for now, anyway, when we're filming.
No, if you're building your own agent from scratch, you might as well just use the REST API directly. Just cut out one of the layers that can all it's doing is stripping vital information.
And bringing in a lot of additional security challenges altogether. Yeah.
Absolutely. It just had this one free text protocol instead of a structured document that actually describes security-related information. I think nearly everyone using MCP right now is using it in a coding environment, right? And everyone in that context is learning you can't have too many, right? Because we now have this thing called context engineering, right? Phrase of the last 14 days. Well, I mean, it's a correct phrase. Internally, we were talking about attention engineering, because it's not even about, got this big context window, it doesn't matter. And context windows are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I just keep on trying more crap in there. We want a good result out of LLM, you need to manage where its locus of attention is, which is what's in that window. Cramming it full of 100 different MCP tools is bad context management. Right? There's just a whole bunch of, maybe someday you'll need to connect this right. We're not doing anything to do with payments, but here's a whole bunch of information about that. Or here's 11 different MCP services from Cloudflare, right? But you might be doing nothing to do with infrastructure. It's like, throw it in there all the time anyway, just in case. It just makes everyone confused, get your model confused, its performance declines, because it's spreading its attention thinly between a whole bunch of unrelated things. So like, this is MCP's fault itself, but I think it might actually be something of a surprise at the authors based on listening to them on the latest Space podcast. But how people are using that is, there's 16,000 MCP servers out there, let's put them all in. The only limit is the length of my context window. It's like, no, that's not it. A shorter context window might actually be better. It's how you use it. Like, it's what's in there relevant to the task and directing model's attention to the right area. And MCP just goes totally in the wrong direction, at least have people using it. So like, to scale it, you have to end up with a discovery system, whether it's MCP or it's something else. What are all the actions an agent could take? Allow it to find the one relevant to its current goal and load that information in and focus. And focus on that while it's working on that, and not have 10, 100,000 irrelevant things in the window about it. Which brings you to, okay, we're going to have some kind of discovery server. We're going to have APIs on one end and a discovery server in front of us. And some people are saying, there needs to be an MCP and MCP servers. This is the thing. This is how it really scans. But just think about it for a while. If you might have the first server might be MCP, and it's say, find me the right MCP server that I should have. But you might as well actually just say, find me the actual full underlying API documentation and give me that, rather than the summary, the two-liner from the MCP tool. Give me the raw thing. So you connect, if you had an MCP server of MCP servers, if I had one, I'd rather ask it, say, hey, MCP server, don't give me another MCP, give me the actual OpenAPI spec that's behind. Right? Because then I have the best of both worlds. I've conveniently accessed this thing over MCP, but when I get it to give me something, it gives me the whole actual thing, not just a short summary. And then you end up with Jentic, is the thing.
One argument to this, if I may, is it is easier for me to just have the MCP server than to get it to put in everything from OpenAI, from the Open API specs.
The MCP, this is the server of servers.
Yes, or I mean, in a way, it's easier for me to have added in these MCP servers. This is the argument that I'm making, than to look through all these look through this potentially quite big Open API spec.
Oh yeah. Well, that's easily so. I mean, if it's just the length of the spec that's a concern, that's just You just saw that.
And the complexity of it, I suppose.
Well, the information in this is properly logged. So here's how we built it, right? Here's how I think anyone going from this perspective would do it. You have some server you connect to over MCP or HTTP if you like. You can search for whatever you need. It'll find it. The raw resources, probably an OpenAPI spec, could be a GraphQL spec, could be something else. It'll do a semantic map, basically as a RAG system, right? It'll find one. It might bring in knowledge about authentication and authorizations, so it only returns stuff you can potentially use in the current security context. When it comes down to the client, you summarize it for LLM consumption. So you try out the irrelevant bits, because it might be, 6,000 lines long. Should pull out the 50 lines related to the actual permission that the AI is looking for, which would be a snippet of JSON or YAML. LMs are already surprisingly great at JSON, but it's a bit token inefficient. So you might just serialize that into Markdown. And then you give that in the line, and that works. And that's nice with LLM. The LLM gets whatever was in the original information, it gets a textual copy that's easy for it to read and to reason about, as it actually will be writing with here. So if I'm writing this, I'm going to put it like a timer in there and not hammer it, but whatever it needs to do, it'll have that information. And it's fully scalable. You could have 1 million APIs exposed to it in this way. It's not going to lose attention or lose context.
Yeah.
Right. So you need a layer of indirection to scale this.
Yeah.
And so software-wise, one other thing is like it's called lake binding. We've actually had it for decades. It's just we need lake binding in this architecture for it to scale.
Yeah, and even my argument there was around, I made this very broad statement that it's easy to call these MCP servers, but actually there's a bunch of configuration involved. It's actually not that simple. So it's not that simple to work with them, basically. Not as or to work with them and work with them properly in production systems. So it's
all this other stuff. It's true. We made a joke. We were at a conference recently, an API conference, and they're all trying to figure out what MCP is. It's like MCP is trying to replace the last 20 or 30 years of work in APIs in one fell swoop, which is confusing them a bit because they found it kind of hard. And I think the realization is MCP is really easy because you just take security now.
It's really easy because you're stripping out all of the important things that were needed. Yes.
All our stuff. You're like, it's easy. Like group, a fully discoverable root access to everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's use it.
Great. Yeah. So let's go into Jentic. So if you were to describe the vision of Jentic in as kind of simple a way as possible for someone who's, not familiar with Jentic, but overall not familiar with this problem, how would you do that?
The story is evolving, right? So it's layered for me. Initially, for totally non-technical comparison, I described it as like building the telephone network for the agents, right? They need to do work. They need to call something. It's all the infrastructure and also the directory services, telephone book, all that. Like, what can you call? I had to actually call it. But as we get more ambitious with time, right? And maybe the vision expands a bit. And we have more opportunity to work with agents. And we don't really want to run the agents, right? Go away. Like people would have their own agents. The agents built it to all different kinds of software. People are going to turn up with their own agents. We don't want to be the agent platform where, it's our agent or you have to go home. But we do want to be the back end that powers all those, in particular the actions they take. So the LLM does the thinking and we help it do the acting, right? The other half of the agent. We stand back and look at that again. Now we're running some agents. We've realized to make agents really work well and go fast and not kill the planet with their energy requirements, and be secure and so on, you really want that LLM to think about the task it has, figure it out, but as quickly as possible, get back into deterministic software. As quickly as possible, get back into a workflow that can just run in the old-fashioned software way, which compared to LLM is basically free, right? In terms of speed, energy, and so on. once you can find, oh, you know what? I birthed this task. I can break it down to these 3 steps. And this first step, that's just a workflow. I know how to do that. I'm just going to follow my standard operating procedure for that piece.
Yeah.
That's very powerful because it's in a workflow for that is, well, it's free, basically. It's more or less zero energy. It's instant, effectively, compared to LLM processing.
Yeah.
So the whole thing moves quickly. It's repeatable. It's testable. Right? It does all these great things. So you realize the more we get into this, we realize what the path forward for all of this, for agents in general, is, LLMs are calling the software in our view, right? This is what an agent really is. That's inverted it a bit, right? So LLM decides what to do next. But as much as possible, it has to try to get back into normal software. So that makes it at scale. So agents kind of have 2 jobs. One is to develop the workflows. Like when an agent is solving a novel problem and there's no workflow, it's breaking it down, it's decomposing it into steps, trying to find tools for this step, for that step. So look at the inputs or outputs of the tools and take the output of this one and put it into input of this one and building it a bit further along my journey of trying to solve this little sub goal. So one thing agents do when there's it's pre-existing workflow or standard operating procedures, they're solving this novel task. And it's solving it, the workflow solving. And then if the workflow exists, like let's say when it solves it and saves it somewhere, right? Like it's another API, another capability it can discover along with all the APIs. Then what it's doing is it's selecting the workflows. It gets a task, breaks it down, and as quickly as possible selects the workflows to do, and it runs it. So agents are basically workflow solvers or workflow selection machines. And that's interesting to us because we realize actually where we need to go as a platform is to basically observe all the agents connected to us solving the workflows and help them save those workflows as capabilities. So on the next run, when they're searching for an API or a tool, they're also searching against all of their saved capabilities of previous runs, which creates a global shared muscle memory between all of these agents, allowing them to operate more deterministically and only really bringing their system to thinking, so to speak, when they actually are doing so.
So can you give me some examples? So this is actually a theme that I've basically, with all technical guests, I've asked, and especially how these agents can actually be used. Could you give me kind of an example system, maybe in practice, but with some tangible things?
Yeah, so we're thinking about like business logic agents, like business context. I could give you like imaginary personal contexts, but it's not really our focus. Right?
No, sure.
So
yeah.
the business context, do my thing. An email arrives from someone, and let's say it's a customer, and you want to update the status in your CRM, and potentially, as a consequence, I'm making this up now, send them a gift, right?
Sure. Not bribing the customer or anything, but yeah.
Corporate gifting or something, right?
Sure, yeah.
Who knows? Sure. So email gets routed into the LLM, and the LLM probably has some kind of like, what is this kind of classification step? Realizes, okay.
So that's more AI agent there. So if you put it into context of maybe AI agent sensor.
I actually start off thinking of one big clumpy agent thing.
Okay, so it's one agent. You've got one agent for this whole system. Cool.
We could talk about spinning it up, but I think then we're talking about a different thing, like scaling it.
Sure.
Generally, it's achievable within one agent.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
With different tool calls, yeah.
Maybe have a context boundary thing there, right? But it comes in, classifies the mail. It realizes this is like, the customer is making a request for a sales call here.
Yeah.
What should I do? Is I should probably update the CRM so that the separate relevant salesperson can find this. The relevant salesperson will actually see it. So we need to search the CRM. So I need to go to Jentic and say, do I have a CRM? Remember, actually you do. You have this one. Right?
And that would probably already be in the context as well of what it's doing.
It probably would have like a system prompt telling you roughly what its job is, right? So it might start a little bit further down saying, I need to look up a customer, or I need to look up an entity in the CRM by email address. what do I have? And on the back end, we would know, well, there's lots of CRMs out there, but this customer has only set up authentication for one, which is HubSpot. So we're going to log in there. What's that API? We would find a specific call and allows it to find the customer, and does search, finds the customer record, downloads that, looks at it, finds the right field, looks at documentation for values and field updates. It does a post, updates the CRM, and then does a little bit more thinking and goes, maybe I need to send this customer a gift because it obviously just had a terrible experience. You learn, like, there's Jentic, do we have a gifting platform we use? And we look through and we realize, yeah, there's a few of those, and there's an authentication fee set up for this one, and this agent is authorized to do it, but only able to some level or something. And we sort that out as well. Now, that's the agent finding that slow path, doing all that discovery on the first pass through. But what if like it looks like that's something that might happen again in the context?
There's the pre-existing path potentially there next time. Yeah.
So we're in a position actually to see all the steps that it took in order to get there. So we can save that workflow back to our infrastructure. That's in Jentic say that. So next time it's looking for its goal, we'll be like, do you want to do the thing where you update the customer and send a gift? And then say, yep, here's the email address. And we can just go, and it's done.
So in that context, or in that kind of in that example, okay, I'm gonna say it. You can please correct me however way, because this is why I want you to hit what I'm asking. Actually, it sounds like Jentic would be the AI agent. So Jentic is the really big sort of AI agent there that does all of that.
I think we are mostly deterministic.
Okay, especially what do you mean in this context?
So we're hosting that in that example I gave.
Mm-hmm.
We're providing some authenticated access to all of the APIs, and then when this workflow is discovered by the agent, which could be anyone's agent, that's connected to us, we identify that workflow and we save it. And when we run that workflow, we're running it deterministically, just a list of steps, right? Just that's old-fashioned software. It's like we've created a higher level API, but it's workflow. It's a callable thing, right? And we're hosting that, and we provide access to that by. In my book, to be an agent, you need an LLM to be in charge, and further to be an LLM directing the process. We, like in our core infrastructure, we don't do that piece. That LLM lives somewhere else.
Yeah.
It could be an agent running on Amazon Bedrock or Beam or Lutra or one of these other platforms. It could be a Python script running that someone wrote themselves. And the only exception is that we are actually also like shipping an open source agent library because, well, we want people to realize how easy it actually is. LangChain's great and all, but it's quite big, right? We can show that you can do it in 1,000 lines of code, and you can read the whole thing in 10 minutes and fully understand it. The agent itself isn't too hard. So we will have some agents in there, but it's not like the core thing. It's we have agents in there, for example, running to pre-discover these workflows against sensitive APIs in an enterprise context, and agents in there for testing purposes. But primarily, the main agent when we're running is the customer has an agent running somewhere, and we're hosting all these capabilities it can just call.
Perfect. Okay, so I think that has made it super clear. So it's like you said at the earlier on, it's the infrastructure for the agent rather than the agent itself. So that's a really good example. Yeah. So okay, so who is somebody who might want to use Jentic, or at what stage, what problem would they need to have that they might want to buy Jentic? Keep it.
Yeah. If you're building an agent from scratch and you want it to be that, and it's the kind of agent we're talking about, so it's an LLM driven process, right? It gets events from somewhere. Maybe you type in, maybe it's reading Slack or any inbox or something, and it does work in response. Then maybe you want to consider us. If you're designing it in a way where there's only one or two things it can potentially do, one or two tools it can call, maybe 5, you probably will just hard code those in, so put them in the prompt. You could do that like with the pre-MCP way of using the tools API in your favorite middle of that. If you have an ambition for it to be more flexible, more capable than that, have access to more tools. It might be all different kinds of reasons. Maybe you wanted to have just literally, there's 100 things you wanted to be able to do. Or maybe you wanted to be able to call tools that the customer might want. Then you need to scale it. And then that's where we come in. Another way to look at it is, so that would be a small company. If you're an enterprise trying to figure out how you're supposed to become like agent first and AI ready, which is hard right now because, well, you know all about the security problems, right? With prompt injection, etc. But you still need to proceed, otherwise you're going to get left behind. You'll be years behind, and it's going to be a very hard position to be in a few years. So you need to proceed today. But what you have is API infrastructure. Not the public APIs out there, the 10, 50,000 public APIs they Spotify and
Warming up even internally.
Internally, you probably got thousands of APIs. You probably spent a long time investing in creating this digital infrastructure inside of your company, where processes, whether it's databases or actually physical processes, depending on what you do, get exposed through APIs. So this can get reused within the organization, and you can control technical debt. This is your asset. This is good that you have that if you've done it. If you haven't, what you can do with agents will be limited by staying with that. Then you can put Jentic in there, and it'll sit in front of that API infrastructure and surface it all at scale into agents. And we can help you run thousands of agents in simulation mode to test what it's going to be like if you let agents loose across that API infrastructure with no risk, because we can do it all in simulation, and that will direct your efforts towards where you need to fix this, or where you can potentially deploy something right now today.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. Okay. So, where do you see, and you definitely said this a little bit already, but where do you see all this going? How from where we are right now, again, we are recording in the summer of 2025. Where do you see, I suppose, less so about AI, like the LLMs themselves getting better? We know that's going to continue happening, and eventually, that'll happen slower, but still will continue happening. Where do you see the infrastructure kind of side of things going, the agentic AI side of things moving?
Yeah, well, this is AI meeting the real world, right? This is kind of the point. Until we have agents at scale, we just have chatbots, really.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So that's kind of that's sort of the way that I've been always framing it, in that the way that AI has been used. So chatbots has been, with the likes of ChatGPT coming out, has been the first big trend. And now we're moving in this AI agent, the agents, autonomous agents kind of doing tasks instead of the humans prompting constantly anyway.
Yeah. So synchronous versus asynchronous, which is fancy language, I guess. But synchronous is you're on session, you type something, it does it, you're still there waiting for it to come back. Arguably not an efficiency gain for you as a human if you're like, tell it to do this, you're like micromanaging it all the way through. There's definitely some efficiency gains there because it can type faster than us, but then we can see this in coding. But that's synchronous. And asynchronous is where you tell it to do something and it goes away and does it. You go on and do something else. And that means it's running in the background. There. We all need to get there. This is like, the benefits of this are incredible. But it's complicated. And I think people are beginning to realize when AI hits real world digital infrastructure, all the old fashioned problems come back, right? Which is, a lot of it is security, but these are organizational things. It's discovery, what do we actually have?
Yeah.
Have we actually documented how this works?
Yeah, and that's often the first thing, is like, and that's something that sounds, I suppose, easier said than done, because especially enterprises, they're so big. You just it's very hard for them to kind of keep track of all of the processes or APIs or things that are in each department when it's all changing so fast.
Yeah. It gets even more perverse than that, right? Like, you might have an enterprise and it's grown, and there's different divisions in different countries with different dev teams. It's also grown by acquisition, so it's brought in stuff from the outside, which is just different to what they already had. And then a team might have its own API, that they use internally for their own stuff, but it's only for internal use. Then they have this managed API, which is the one that they publish to the rest of the organization, that the rest of the organization is supposed to use. But the thing is, some of those people know some other people and told them about some of the secret APIs. So some parts of the organization that build applications that use the undocumented APIs to get some stuff done. So you have this shadow web of dependencies across the organization where this, suddenly it's ossified. This team tried to keep something private to itself so they would have the flexibility to change it.
Yeah.
But 2 years later, they realized when they changed it, suddenly went to fire someone else in the organization that they got the blame. So you know what? Here to be dragons, never touch anything. Huh? And it gets just immediately the whole situation gets complicated. That's scary, right? The AKI land is there, right?
And that's the reality by now, even.
Yeah. This is all right. There's a big industry, AKI industry out there. There's global conferences. There's thousands of vendors sell solutions into enterprise to help them manage their digital infrastructure, which basically means APIs.
Yeah.
This is how big companies run. It's how governments run. It's how it's the digitalization that's happened like over the past 35 years has brought us to this situation. But it's big and it's complicated and it's messy. And now we want to connect AI to it, right? So we have AI land over in Silicon Valley and to some extent spread around Dublin and other parts of the world and London, Paris and stuff. And an API land, which has been there for quite a long time, and we need to connect to. And I think a lot of people in AI land who might just be in their 20s, making millions a year, or might have, a multi-decade career, but in machine learning, and not have seen like the horrible mess of real world digital infrastructure at scale, are beginning to realize, you try to connect this stuff in, you're like, okay, just give us a well-organized catalog of all the APIs that are out there. And there isn't a lot.
Yep.
Right.
And it's very hard to build one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or like just, it's MCP doesn't cut it because that's everything can access everything. So actually, no, this is a regulated space. This is customer data and it's private information, or this is sensitive information because we're a company, or that's the CEO's salary. You can't just connect something to the HR system over MCP and give it root access. It has to be, there's nuance and authorization and business decisions that need to be made all across that stuff. So I think we're about to enter that phase of, it might feel like a valley of despair, but really it's a bursting of the hype because this amazing technology has to meet this real world that exists, this real digital world that exists, and it can't reinvent it unless it wants to go down another multi-decade. We have to rebuild everything from scratch, kind of. But certainly those people are out there. But really, the digital infrastructure that's out there is the one that needs to be connected to. So watch out for that stuff. I think I saw news last week about OpenAI hiring professional services engineers or forward deployed engineers to go into customers. I wonder just that what that is, right? That they're realizing to actually get into enterprise at scale with AI.
Yeah.
That enterprise is saying, well, you're going to have to deal with
stuff. So they're becoming that kind of, it may seem like they're becoming more of a services company in that way.
Yeah, well, I wonder, that seems like a tar pit. This is like systems integration. It's unsexy, probably a good business in a way, right? Because it's hard. Probably pretty low margin, goes on forever. So yeah, I wonder if that's like an early signal of the AI hype is up here and is like absolutely transformative and amazing. But if you want to connect it, this stuff is full of nuance and undocumented decisions that really matter to people. And like, for instance, your data and your privacy, maybe your money.
Okay. So as we're kind of wrapping up, what would you say would be your closing thoughts for someone who is looking to deploy AI for their enterprises, organizations? Maybe what kind of advice or trends, and it's summarized, would you give from it?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated position to be in right now.
Yeah.
Like there's huge potential, huge promises, transformative. Failing to engage with it might kill your company. but how do you engage with it? Right? Just acknowledging the problems here, right? How do you even find a vendor that you have any confidence is still going to be there in 2 years? The security issues, if you're not already aware, are like there's some intrinsic difficulties here. One is like some of these things like MCP, basically you've grown up without the notion of security, right? But you stick to your existing guns and
I love it. I love the honesty.
they're trying to add it in, but like it'll end up basically with what we had before, or and in the end, it was another protocol. It's another protocol.
It
It
is
doesn't matter. AI can speak every protocol.
the next protocol to end all protocols.
Yeah, there's an SHD comic of that. But
Yes.
and it's kind of but this is a slight tangent. There is protocol wars, a standard wars going on. Google, IBM, everyone has their own version of this now, and I just think it's such a sideshow. Like AI can basically speak everything. Doesn't really matter what protocol you're speaking, so long as you're speaking a protocol. I think maybe the best version of this, I only can remember the name, but someone proposed that like the universal protocol is you connect to a server and you say in plain English, "Hey, what's your protocol?" And its LLM responds, and from that point on, your LLM speaks HTTP, or you obviously go to normal HTTP kind for that, but they can basically just resume the session on whatever protocol you like. And then, do you need A to A for Google? Do you need like ACP and all this other stuff? It's just like, you know what? You just say, hey, I'm going to send you a JSON object. It's going to have the following fields telling you about this stuff. I mean, the agents that are here. The client says, that's great. Okay. And then it can send that JSON, and it doesn't have to be the protocol per schema. Yeah. Anyway, LLMs speak everything. So it's kind of a sideshow that people are trying to have the protocol war, because that's the good old fashioned fun they had in the old days. I think we're a little bit past that, or should be. But anyway, that poor person in the enterprise who's got this task, maybe a CTO or a CIO or someone to try to figure out how to move forward. If I'm in that person's shoes, first of all, bandwidth obsolescence is a real risk. So you need to try to focus on standards and open standards and things that, like an architectural approach that will survive like the idiosyncrasies of any one particular vendor.
So longevity.
Maybe that's MCP, but I think open API is just basically becomes 10 times more important than it was before this. Right. Like open API has existed for a long time, will continue to exist. It's the de facto standard. Everyone uses it. It's backed by the Linux Foundation. We're governed by the Linux Foundation. It's trusted. So it used to be for documentation. Now it's actually for describing an interface to an LLM, documenting it for a machine. And that's what we have. So if you've already invested in API infrastructure and invested in open API, that's good. Ratso is a new thing for them, which is the workflows. So that's good. Watch out for Ratso. I think we're about to enter the age of Ratso, which is open API based workflows. This present frame, we have adopted Ratso very strongly, and open source a whole bunch of tooling around it. Because we acknowledged, like, how is anyone going to trust us to still be around in 2 years? I sure hope we are, but like, I can't prove it. But what I can, I think, convince anyone is open API will still be there, and Ratso will still be there, and investment in working with us is an investment in that architecture. But broadly speaking, it's very hard to move right now because of move anything into production, because it's hard to see what's going on, and there's real security and reliability issues. All of this is going to be driven by the capabilities of the underlying API infrastructure, which is probably what that person's been mostly doing for the last 5 years anyway, is trying to solve like digital API infrastructure issues. Good APIs make capable agents. That's what it's going to all boil down to. So right now, all work that can be done to make high quality, well-documented internal APIs, to have them all properly managed. They're in gateways, the security is managed, there's catalogs in front of that say, here's what we have, here's where you can get it. Trying to do best in class in that means you have the infrastructure to go forward with AI agents. If you wait around until AI agents get good, and then start a new infrastructure and using the scratch. You'll also have to go back and repair that infrastructure for the next 3 or 5 years. So start with the infrastructure, the APIs.
Okay. Okay, I'll ask absolute last one. For just any human working within these enterprises organizations who is looking to use AI efficiently or effectively, what kind of guidance would you have for them, again, to be sort of future focused and to future proof themselves?
Well, use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a mindset thing here.
And this is preaching to the choir, I think, because this has been a bit of
Some people still aren't using it, like they think it's too hard. Like this is an incredible technology because anyone can use it. It's just natural language. You can literally speak to the thing, you know. If that's what you want to do. Here I have AI spam callers coming. Like they're using it. You cut up, there's gonna be a robot voice. So there's a mindset you need to adopt, which is, when you use it, you're going to be amazed and then you're going to be disappointed. A lot of people just get off the kind of boat that say, oh, AI is fine and it's but it's toy, so I'm going to replace me. The thing is, then the people who persevere learn how to make it work despite the things that it's crabbing. And that's a new skill set they're discovering. And they're supercharging themselves with that skill set because now they're really operating at more like high intellectual level. Their brain is thinking about the architecture of tasks and the information and how it's like having a digital workforce of themselves, and they all become a manager of that.
Yeah.
And that's
So as long as they're still the manager, I think this is something kind of that we were talking about before we started. As long as like they're ultimately still the ones in charge, but they're using the AI as kind of different tools.
And where it's good and where it's bad.
Yeah.
They're not letting it tell them what to do. They bring human value. Right now, this might not always be the case, but right now we still do. Not all of us. You have to work hard at it, but I don't think AI truly understands what it's talking about. Surprising in some ways. Clearly, there is some implicit understanding built into these models as they try to basically predict the next outcome. They are somehow mapping the universe, strangely. But just in day-to-day experience, it'll give you a very interesting document. When you really try to work with it, you realize, it doesn't really have a picture. Its head and what it's doing here.
Yeah.
We can have a picture in our head.
Yeah. But still, it still helps with that additional either brainstorming or helping you to think through things.
Yeah. At huge speed. Do like a week's research in 15 minutes and bring it back to you. Take a computer,
That's amazing.
bring it down and condense it. If you take anything from one form and turn it into another form, it could do a first version of nearly anything for you. But the vision right now still has to come from the human. And your ability to have a clear vision in your head and articulate it to yourself and articulate it to the machine and help it get it then to help you articulate it to all those pesky humans around, right? Like that vision thing is still for now a uniquely human thing. And anyway, the overall lesson is you got to lean into it and keep on working with it, work through its deficiencies, which are still there but will get better.
Yeah.
And learn how to do that because that's a new skill now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people just get off at the first bone and say, because this thing won't replace me. I was like, it'll just replace you in surprising ways. If you do that, you're right and you're wrong. It won't replace you like all in one go. Bits of your job will start disappearing. And then.
Yeah.
Yep.
So use AI. Use AI. Use it carefully.
Use it everywhere. Just use it carefully. Yes.
Great. So thank you so much for this episode, Seán, for all the conversations. It's been super fascinating. And also thank you to our listeners. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, then please make sure to like the episode. Follow us on the platform that you're listening on and everywhere. And do share it with your friends who are interested about what is going on with AI, what will happen in the future, and also in particular with AI infrastructure. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.